When you picture earthquake zones, you probably think of California, Japan, or Chile. But what if I told you that beneath the United Kingdom's famously tranquil surface, there's a surprising amount of seismic activity? Every year, hundreds of tremors shake Britain, hinting at something bigger right around the corner. So is the UK overdue for a large, damaging earthquake? And what will happen when it hits? This all might sound weird because the UK is not near the boundary of any tectonic plates. But that doesn't mean it can't get earthquakes. The United Kingdom, with its rolling green hills and quaint villages, probably wouldn't even rank in the top 100 places you'd think of with regards to earthquakes. Yet beneath its seemingly tranquil surface, Britain sits on a complex geological landscape that experiences hundreds of earthquakes every year. Now, most of these are too small to be felt, but the fact that they hit at all is a clear indication that the Earth here is far from still. And also, there's the fact that Britain is an island country. Those rarely exist without some form of tectonic activity, even if it's not consistent. Geographically, the United Kingdom is an island nation, primarily composed of Great Britain and the northeastern part of the island of Ireland, along with numerous smaller islands. And its landscape is surprisingly diverse. While the most common idea of British country is one of gently rolling hills, there's also the rugged mountains of Scotland and Wales to the flatter, low-lying plains of eastern England. This variety, of course, is a direct result of millions of years of geologic activity. Unlike countries situated on active plate boundaries where colossal tectonic plates grind past each other, the UK lies firmly in the middle of the Eurasian plate. This is probably why nobody assumes the country would be due for a destructive earthquake. After all, plate boundaries are typically where all the action occurs. This might lead one to believe the UK should be seismically inert. However, even within the stable interior of a tectonic plate, stresses can build up, and old fault lines can be reactivated. Think of it like a piece of old timber. Even after it's been cut and installed, internal pressures can cause it to creak and shift along old grain lines. The New Madrid seismic zone in the middle of North America is a similar, tectonically active region. Getting back to the UK, its geologic past is very rich, but violent. Hundreds of millions of years ago, Britain was part of a supercontinent, experiencing colossal collisions as landmasses moved and merged. These ancient events created deep-seated fault lines, fractures in the Earth's crust where rocks move past each other. While these faults are now largely inactive in terms of major plate movement, they represent zones of weakness. Today, the distant forces from the spreading of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge to the west and the collision of the African and Eurasian plates to the south transmit stresses across the vast Eurasian plate. These stresses, though subtle, are enough to occasionally reactivate these old, buried fault lines beneath the UK. One of the most significant geologic features influencing UK seismicity is the presence of numerous ancient mountain building events, known as orogenies. The Caledonian orogeny, which occurred between about 490 and 390 million years ago, shaped much of Scotland, northern England, and Wales. Later, the Variscan orogeny, around 370 to 280 million years ago, impacted southern England and Wales. These events didn't just create mountains, they also formed intricate networks of faults, many of which remain beneath the surface today. So while the UK isn't on a major plate boundary, its seismic activity is a consequence of those inherited weaknesses. Imagine the Earth's crust here is a vast ancient mosaic. The tiles are mostly stable, but the grout lines, those ancient faults, are still susceptible to tiny shifts when the broader forces of the Eurasian plate push and pull. When enough stress accumulates along one of these buried fault lines, the rocks abruptly slip, releasing energy in the form of seismic waves, also known as an earthquake. But here's the real kicker. These quakes are typically shallow, occurring within the upper crust, often at depths of 5 to 20 kilometers. This might seem deep, but it's actually very shallow. And this shallow nature means that even moderate earthquakes can be felt over a wide area, as the energy doesn't have very far to travel to the surface. This also means that these earthquakes hit much harder, Now, all of this might seem theoretical. So what exactly is the UK's history with earthquakes? Once again, I've ditched a sponsor for this video because I want to tell you guys all about my awesome Substack. Every week, I write additional articles that go along with my weekly videos, and it's 100% free forever and always. So go to geographicjeff.substack.com to sign up and join this rapidly growing geography community. For many, the idea of an earthquake in the United Kingdom conjures images of a minor tremor, perhaps a rattling teacup, rather than a serious geologic event. Yet the UK's seismic history is far more active than its tranquil reputation suggests, offering compelling evidence that significant quakes are not an anomaly, but a reoccurring, if uncommon, feature. While instrumental records are a relatively modern invention, accounts of felt earthquakes stretch back centuries in Britain. One of the earliest, reliable reports dates back to the year 974, and though details are scarce, reports suggest that the earthquake was strong enough to impact the entirety of England. Suffice it to say, this was not a small rattler. It was something bigger. More striking is the 1382 Dover Straits earthquake, believed to have been one of the strongest medieval quakes to affect Britain. Historic sources describe widespread damage in London and the southeast, with reports of church spires crumbling and severe shaking felt across parts of England, France, and Flanders. This event serves as a reminder that powerful seismic events have occurred on British shores long before seismographs existed. Fast forward a few hundred years and the UK would get hit by another alarming seismic event. The 1750 London earthquakes caused significant upheaval in the country's capital. On March 8th, an earthquake reportedly cracked walls and toppled chimneys throughout the city. This particular event even inspired sermons and widespread public debate, with some fearing divine retribution. While these historic accounts are anecdotal, they paint a picture of a population very much aware of the Earth's occasional rumblings beneath their feet. However, with the advent of seismology in the 1800s and early 1900s, the frequency and distribution of UK earthquakes became more easily understood. According to the British Geological Survey, the UK actually experiences hundreds of earthquakes annually. Though the vast majority are so small, they're only detected by sophisticated equipment. But while hundreds hit each year, only about 20 to 30 of these are actually felt by people, and even those are typically very weak. Despite this constant low-level activity, several notable modern quakes stand out. The 1884 Colchester earthquake remains one of the most damaging recorded in British history. Striking on April 22nd, it devastated parts of Essex, damaging over 1,200 buildings, destroying chimneys, and cracking walls. Its estimated magnitude of 4.6 to 5.1 demonstrates that even moderate earthquakes can have significant local impacts, particularly on older, less resilient structures. The 1931 Dogger Bank earthquake, which struck off the coast of Newcastle and Hull, was strong enough to create a tsunami. It ended up not causing much damage, but the reality that it was even possible was quite alarming. More recently, the 2008 Market Raisin earthquake in Lincolnshire, with a magnitude of 5.2, was the largest onshore earthquake in the UK for nearly 25 years. It was felt across much of England and even into parts of Wales and Scotland, causing minor structural damage and knocking items off shelves. While no fatalities were reported, it served as a widespread reminder that significant seismic events are not confined to distant lands. Similarly, the 2018 Wales earthquake, magnitude 4.4, caused widespread shaking in South Wales, bringing the reality of seismic activity directly to a new generation. So suffice it to say, the UK is certainly more seismically active than perhaps its reputation suggests. Which brings us to the final question of this video. Is the UK overdue for a large seismic event? The UK has a consistent background of seismic activity, even if its reputation doesn't suggest that to be the case. To go along with historic records of moderately sized earth rattlers, many seismologists have come to a sobering conclusion. The UK may be overdue for an earthquake that could cause significant damage. But let's set something straight first. The very concept of an overdue earthquake, something we hear quite often about a place like California, isn't actually about precise timing, like a train schedule. Rather, it relates to the statistical probability of seismic activity on a given fault or within a region. Imagine a rubber band being slowly stretched. The stress builds up over time until it reaches a breaking point, at which time the band snaps, releasing the tension. Similarly, tectonic forces continuously load stress onto the UK's ancient fault lines. Since major earthquakes in intraplate regions like the UK tend to occur at irregular intervals, long periods of nothing happening can indicate a buildup of stress that will eventually be released. But while the UK's historic earthquakes aren't colossal earth shakers by global standards, in a country unprepared for seismic shocks, they could still be substantial. The primary concern for the UK isn't necessarily a catastrophic magnitude 9, 8, or even 7 earthquake. Those aren't likely to happen in the UK, so feel free to unburden yourself with any of those fears. The real threat instead lies in a moderate earthquake, more likely in the magnitude 5 to 6 range, occurring in a populated area. Because here's the real issue. Buildings in the UK are generally not designed with significant seismic resilience in mind. Think older, unreinforced masonry buildings, construction that can be quite common in the UK. Because unlike earthquake-prone regions, building codes in the UK typically don't require structures to withstand earthquake shaking. In fact, many of Britain's cities, but particularly those with historic centers, are filled with buildings that are especially vulnerable to even moderate tremors. And here's the unfortunate reality around all earthquakes. Regardless of the actual magnitude, it's the collapsing of buildings and infrastructure that causes the most harm. A city built to withstand magnitude 8 earthquakes will fare better overall than a city not built to withstand a magnitude 6 earthquake. So a significant shake in the UK could lead to widespread structural damage, collapsing chimneys and potentially buildings, damaging infrastructure, and even causing serious injuries or fatalities. There's one other major issue in the UK though. The country has a critical vulnerability in its nuclear facilities. You see, many of these plants were designed and constructed decades ago, long before modern seismic understanding was fully developed, and certainly not to the stringent earthquake standards seen in places like Japan or California. While operators maintain that facilities are robust, the very premise of their location assumes low seismic risk. An unexpected moderate quake could test these older designs in ways they were never intended, raising concerns about potential damage, the release of radioactive materials, and the complex safety protocols required in such an event. The idea that critical national infrastructure, from power grids to transportation networks, could be compromised by a relatively common geologic event underscores a significant oversight. This isn't to say nuclear power plants are unsafe, but they are far more sensitive to any natural event. And when they're not built specifically to withstand those events, bad things can happen. Just ask Japan and the 2011 Fukushima earthquake and nuclear meltdown event. To add to all of this, there's also the cumulative effect of a swarm of smaller earthquakes, where a series of tremors occur over days or weeks. While individual quakes might be minor, the continuous shaking can weaken structures with each successive hit, generate widespread panic, and overwhelm emergency services, potentially leading to more damage and disruption than a single larger event. So then it's when, not if, the UK will feel another moderate earthquake. And depending on where it hits, will determine how much damage is caused. The UK is more susceptible to earthquakes than most people probably think. But while the country isn't nearly as prone to earthquakes as Japan, Chile, or California, its overall lack of preparedness does mean that damage by even a moderate earthquake will be felt much harder. Speaking of shaky areas, this week I'm taking a first-class train in New Zealand from Auckland to Wellington. And if you want to join me, be sure to check out that video over on my travel channel. I hope you enjoyed learning all about the UK's surprisingly shaky reputation. If you did, be sure to check out this video all about why California's big one hasn't hit yet. Thanks for watching. See you next time.